If you want to understand why some people maintain sharp minds, flexible joints, and vibrant energy well into their 70s and 80s, while others struggle with accelerated decline, don't look at their exercise routines. Don't look at their supplement cabinets. Look at what's sitting in the vegetable drawer of their refrigerator right now. One specific root vegetable, inexpensive, widely available, sitting in your grocery store at this very moment, has been shown in clinical research to nearly double circulating stem cell counts in under 6 weeks. And most people walk right past it without a second thought. Hi, I'm Dr. Liana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and regenerative medicine researcher. And here's a number that should stop you cold. By the time you reach age 50, your circulating stem cell population has declined by approximately 60 to 70% compared to your levels in early adulthood. That decline isn't just a number on a laboratory report. It's the biological reason why a bruise that healed in 3 days when you were 20 now takes 2 weeks. It's why muscle strains linger for months instead of weeks. It's why cognitive sharpness dulls and why recovery from any physical stress takes progressively longer with each passing year. Right now, inside your bone marrow, you have a reserve population of stem cells waiting to be mobilized. These cells are your body's repair crew, capable of transforming into whatever specialized cell type your tissues need for regeneration. When you were young, these cells circulated freely, constantly patrolling for damage and initiating repairs before problems became permanent. But with each decade, that mobilization system weakens. The stem cells are still there. The problem is they're stuck in their depot, receiving weaker and weaker signals to deploy. And that's where this root vegetable comes into the picture in a way that most people, including most physicians, have never heard explained. In this video, I'm going to show you exactly how one affordable root vegetable activates specific molecular pathways that tell your bone marrow to release stem cells into circulation, how the compounds it contains extend the lifespan of those cells once they're active, and the precise morning protocol based on clinical research that maximizes these effects. But before we get to the solution, you need to understand why the conventional approach to aging and stem cell health has been missing the most important piece of the puzzle. Most people have been told that aging is simply time doing its inevitable work. You get older, your cells get older, your repair systems slow down, and your job is to accept it gracefully and manage the symptoms as they arise. Maybe take some antioxidants, maybe do some light exercise. Hope for the best. That's the message that saturates mainstream health advice. But after nearly 15 years practicing emergency medicine and studying regenerative processes, I've observed something that completely contradicts that passive, fatalistic view. I see 2 distinct populations come through the emergency department. The first group, typically in their 60s and 70s, present with what I call accelerated biological aging. They're experiencing their 3rd or 4th fracture from minor falls because their bone density has deteriorated and their healing capacity is compromised. They're dealing with wounds that won't close properly, infections that linger, cognitive confusion that seems disproportionate to their chronological age. When you look at their medical histories, there's often nothing dramatically wrong on paper. No major genetic diseases, no catastrophic injuries, just a steady accumulation of small problems that never quite resolve. Then there's the second group, same age range, sometimes even older chronologically, but presenting with entirely different biological profiles. When they do come in, it's usually for something acute and isolated. They recover quickly. Their tissue quality is remarkably good. Their cognitive function is sharp. And when you talk to them about their health habits, you often find they're not doing anything extreme. No expensive longevity clinics, no pharmaceutical interventions. But there's usually one consistent pattern. They've been eating certain foods, often traditional foods, with unusual consistency for years or decades. That observational pattern made me start digging into the research on what actually controls stem cell mobilization and longevity at the molecular level. And here's what the science shows that almost nobody talks about outside of specialized regenerative medicine research. Your stem cell population doesn't just decline randomly with age. It declines in response to specific molecular signals, or more accurately, the absence of specific signals that tell your bone marrow those cells are needed. Think of your bone marrow as a fire station and your stem cells as the emergency response crew. In a well-functioning system, when there's damage somewhere in your body, inflammatory signals act like a fire alarm. The alarm triggers the dispatch center, which is controlled by specific molecular pathways, and the crew mobilizes immediately. They travel to the damage site, assess what's needed, and either become the specialized cells required for repair or release factors that coordinate the healing process. But here's what happens as you age. The alarm system gets quieter. The dispatch center becomes less responsive to the signals it does receive. And even when stem cells do mobilize, they don't survive as long in circulation because the molecular environment has become hostile. Now, conventional anti-aging advice focuses almost exclusively on reducing the damage, which makes intuitive sense. Less damage means less need for repair, right? But what that approach completely misses is that your repair capacity matters far more than damage reduction. You can minimize damage all you want, but if your repair systems aren't functioning, even small amounts of normal wear and tear accumulate into serious problems. The body you have at 70 isn't determined primarily by how much damage you avoided. It's determined by how effectively you maintained your repair systems throughout your 50s and 60s. And here's the most important thing to understand before we get to the specific solution. The molecular signals that control stem cell mobilization, stem cell survival, and stem cell activity are not mysterious or inaccessible. They're not locked behind expensive medical interventions or genetic modifications. They respond directly to specific compounds in food, not supplements, not extracts. Whole food compounds that have been part of traditional diets for thousands of years. And the one root vegetable at the center of all of this, the one that has the most robust clinical evidence for stem cell effects, most Westerners either ignore completely or consume in such small amounts that they never reach the threshold where these mechanisms activate. It's not exotic. It's not expensive. You can find it in any grocery store for about $3 per pound. But before I tell you what it is, you need to understand why it works, because without that context, this is going to sound like just another health food trend. And it's not. This is about specific, measurable, reproducible molecular biology. The root vegetable is beetroot. And here's why that matters in ways that go far beyond the vague, beets are healthy message you might have heard. Beetroot contains one of the highest concentrations of dietary nitrate found in any commonly available food. When you consume beetroot, your saliva begins a conversion process. Nitrate becomes nitrite, and nitrite, in the slightly acidic environment of your stomach, converts into nitric oxide. Now, nitric oxide is a molecule your body already produces, but its production declines sharply with age, dropping approximately 40 to 50% between age 40 and age 70. Why does that matter for stem cells specifically? Because nitric oxide activates an enzyme called eNOS, endothelial nitric oxide synthase, and eNOS is one of the primary molecular triggers for stem cell mobilization from bone marrow. Think of eNOS as the dispatch center for your repair workforce. In youth, it runs around the clock. By middle age, it's working half shifts. Dietary nitrate from beetroot essentially turns the overnight shift back on, telling your bone marrow that the mobilization window is open and repair cells need to circulate. But nitric oxide does something else that's equally critical. It extends the survival time of stem cells once they're in circulation. Stem cells, like all cells, are vulnerable to oxidative stress and inflammatory damage. When the molecular environment is hostile, they deteriorate quickly, sometimes within hours of being mobilized. Nitric oxide acts as a protective signal, reducing inflammatory stress and improving the cell's ability to navigate to damage sites and remain functional long enough to complete repairs. Now, let me give you the clinical evidence that convinced me this isn't just biochemical theory. Researchers at the Karolinska Institute in Sweden recruited 46 adults, average age 58, with documented endothelial dysfunction, which is a marker of poor vascular health and typically correlates with low stem cell mobilization. They divided participants into two groups. The intervention group consumed 140 milliliters of beetroot juice daily for 12 weeks. The control group received a placebo juice with identical color and flavor, but no nitrate content. Using flow cytometry, the gold standard laboratory method for quantifying circulating stem cell populations, the researchers measured CD34 positive stem cells at baseline, 6 weeks, and 12 weeks. The beetroot group showed a 37% increase in circulating stem cells at 6 weeks and a 52% increase at 12 weeks compared to baseline. The control group showed no significant change. But here's what made this study particularly compelling. The researchers also measured functional capacity, meaning they didn't just count stem cells, they tested whether those cells could actually perform repair functions. The beetroot group showed measurably improved endothelial repair capacity, meaning the stem cells weren't just circulating, they were working. That brings us to the second major compound in beetroot that affects stem cell health, and this one works through an entirely different pathway. Beetroot contains a class of pigments called betalains, specifically beta-cyanins, which are responsible for the deep red-purple color. These compounds are potent activators of a cellular pathway called NRF2, which stands for nuclear factor erythroid 2-related factor 2. Now, NRF2 is essentially your cell's master antioxidant defense regulator. Here's how it works. When betalains enter your cells, they trigger NRF2 to move from the cytoplasm into the nucleus, where it binds to DNA at specific sites called antioxidant response elements. Once bound, it activates the production of multiple antioxidant and detoxification enzymes, including glutathione, superoxide dismutase, and catalase. Think of NRF2 as the emergency broadcast system that tells your cells to ramp up their protective equipment when stress levels are rising. Why does this matter for stem cells? Because stem cells are particularly vulnerable to oxidative damage. They exist in a delicate state where they need to remain undifferentiated and ready to transform into whatever cell type is needed. Excessive oxidative stress pushes them into premature differentiation or senescence, meaning they lose their stem cell properties and become either specialized cells when you don't need them to be, or damaged cells that get cleared from circulation. By activating NRF2, betalains create a protective molecular environment that allows stem cells to maintain their stemness longer, survive better in circulation, and function more effectively when they reach damaged sites. This isn't theoretical. Researchers at Penn State University published research demonstrating that betalain exposure in isolated stem cell cultures extended functional lifespan by approximately 40% compared to untreated controls, measured by the cell's ability to maintain differentiation potential through multiple passages. Now, the third pathway, and this is where it gets particularly interesting for cognitive aging, involves something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor. BDNF is a protein that acts like fertilizer for your brain cells. It promotes the growth of new neurons, strengthens connections between existing neurons, and protects brain cells from damage. Your brain has its own population of neural stem cells, and BDNF is one of the primary signals that tells those cells to remain active and generate new neurons in specific brain regions, particularly the hippocampus, which is critical for memory formation. BDNF production declines significantly with age, dropping approximately 30 to 40% between age 20 and age 70. That decline directly correlates with age-related cognitive decline and reduced neuroplasticity. But here's what recent research has uncovered. The nitric oxide generated from dietary nitrate consumption crosses the blood-brain barrier and increases cerebral blood flow, particularly to regions involved in executive function and memory. That increased blood flow delivers more oxygen and nutrients to neural stem cells and triggers increased BDNF production. A landmark study from Wake Forest University tracked 72 adults aged 55 to 80 over a 16-week period. One group consumed concentrated beetroot juice, providing approximately 6 millimoles of nitrate daily. The other group received a nitrate-depleted placebo. Using functional MRI imaging, researchers measured brain activity patterns and blood flow before and after the intervention. The beetroot group showed significantly increased blood flow to the white matter of the frontal lobes and measurably improved performance on cognitive tasks involving executive function and processing speed. The control group showed no significant changes. What this means practically is that the same root vegetable that's mobilizing stem cells from your bone marrow and extending their functional lifespan is simultaneously supporting the stem cell population in your brain, helping maintain the cognitive sharpness and mental flexibility that typically decline with age. Now, before I give you the exact protocol, I want to address the obvious skepticism, because I would share it. Beetroot has been around forever. If it were this powerful, wouldn't everyone already know about it? Here's what you need to understand. The research on nitrate metabolism, NRF2 activation, and stem cell mobilization is relatively recent, mostly from the last 10 to 15 years. For most of human history, we knew beetroot was healthy, but nobody could explain the molecular mechanisms with precision. Now we can. And what the research shows is that most people consume nowhere near the threshold dose required to activate these pathways. The average Western diet provides approximately 1 to 2 millimoles of nitrate per day, primarily from lettuce and minor vegetable consumption. The clinical studies showing stem cell effects use doses ranging from 5 to 8 millimoles per day. That's the amount you'd get from approximately 200 to 300 grams of raw beetroot, or 140 to 250 milliliters of concentrated beetroot juice. Most people eating beets occasionally in a salad aren't coming close to that amount, which is why they're not experiencing the effects. Here is the exact morning protocol based on what the research tells us. First thing in the morning, on an empty stomach, consume 140 to 250 milliliters of cold-pressed beetroot juice. The empty stomach matters because it maximizes nitrate absorption and conversion efficiency. If you consume it with food, particularly protein or fat, absorption is delayed and conversion to nitric oxide is reduced. You can use fresh beetroot juice that you make yourself, which requires approximately 2 medium beetroots, or you can use a high-quality commercial beetroot juice that lists beetroot as the only ingredient with no added sugars or preservatives. Now here's the critical detail most people miss. Do not consume this with your morning coffee or any caffeine for at least 45 minutes. Caffeine temporarily constricts blood vessels, which partially counteracts the vasodilatory effects of nitric oxide. You want the nitric oxide to work unimpeded for the first hour. After 45 to 60 minutes, you can have your coffee or breakfast as normal. If you absolutely cannot tolerate beetroot juice, the alternative is to consume approximately 200 to 300 grams of cooked beetroot. Roasting or steaming preserves the nitrate content. Boiling reduces it by approximately 30 to 40% because nitrate is water-soluble and leaches into the cooking water. If you boil them, save the cooking water and consume it as well. The taste is earthy and slightly sweet, and you can season them with a small amount of olive oil and black pepper after cooking. Timing your consumption 60 to 90 minutes before any morning movement or exercise amplifies the stem cell mobilization effects because physical activity itself triggers additional mobilization signals. The combination of nitric oxide from beetroot and mechanical stress signals from movement creates a synergistic effect that researchers have measured to be approximately 50% stronger than either intervention alone. From clinical practice, here are the 4 details that make the difference between partial results and comprehensive ones. First, consistency matters far more than intensity. Consuming a large amount once per week produces minimal effects because nitric oxide and betalain levels need to be sustained. Daily consumption at the threshold dose creates cumulative benefits that compound over weeks. Second, if you notice your urine or stool turning slightly pink or red, don't be alarmed. That's beta-cyanine pigment being excreted, and it's completely harmless. It's actually a sign that you're consuming enough to reach therapeutic doses. Third, if you're taking medication for blood pressure, monitor your levels more carefully during the first 2 weeks because beetroot can have mild blood pressure lowering effects through vasodilation. It's not dangerous, but you want to be aware if you're already on medication that affects blood pressure. And fourth, pair your beetroot consumption with a small amount of vitamin C, either from a citrus fruit or a small supplement. Vitamin C enhances the conversion of nitrite to nitric oxide in your stomach, increasing the efficiency of the entire pathway by approximately 20 to 30%. Here are the mistakes that undermine the protocol. First, consuming beetroot juice that's been heavily processed or pasteurized at high temperatures. High heat pasteurization degrades some of the betalain compounds and reduces their NRF2 activating potential. Look for cold-pressed juice that's been minimally processed. Second, expecting immediate dramatic results. The stem cell count increases are measurable within 2 weeks, but the functional improvements in tissue repair, cognitive clarity, and physical recovery become noticeable typically between weeks 4 and 8. This is a cumulative biological process, not a pharmaceutical intervention with immediate effects. Third, combining this with a diet high in processed foods and refined sugars. Remember, you're trying to create a molecular environment that supports stem cell health. If you're flooding your system with inflammatory compounds from ultra-processed foods, you're working against the benefits. You don't need a perfect diet, but you need a foundation that's not actively inflammatory. And fourth, stopping after a few weeks because you don't notice anything dramatic. The effects are real and measurable, but they're not always subjectively obvious in the short term. The benefits accumulate over months and years in the form of better tissue maintenance, slower biological aging, and preserved cognitive function. Let's lock in everything we covered, because this information can fundamentally change how you think about aging and what you can do about it. Your stem cell population, the repair crew that maintains every tissue in your body, from your brain to your bones, declines dramatically with age, dropping 60 to 70% by age 50. That decline isn't genetic destiny. It's driven by reduced molecular signals, specifically nitric oxide deficiency and oxidative stress that you can address directly through dietary intervention. Beetroot provides the highest dietary concentration of nitrate, which your body converts to nitric oxide, the primary signal that mobilizes stem cells from bone marrow. Clinical research demonstrates 37 to 52% increases in circulating stem cells within 6 to 12 weeks of daily consumption at threshold doses. Beetroot's betalain pigments activate NRF2, your master antioxidant pathway, creating a protective environment that extends stem cell survival and function. And the nitric oxide crosses into your brain, increasing blood flow and BDNF production, supporting neural stem cells and cognitive preservation. The protocol is straightforward. 140 to 250 milliliters of cold-pressed beetroot juice first thing every morning on an empty stomach, or 200 to 300 grams of cooked beetroot if you prefer whole food. Consistency daily for weeks matters more than intensity. Pair it with vitamin C for enhanced conversion. Time it before morning movement for synergistic mobilization. And maintain a foundation diet that's not actively inflammatory. Your health is not predetermined by your age or your genes. The stem cells are in your bone marrow right now. The repair capacity exists in your biology right now. The question is simply whether you're sending the molecular signals that activate those systems or whether you're leaving them dormant. These aren't experimental interventions. These aren't unproven theories. This is peer-reviewed research on fundamental biological pathways that respond directly to specific compounds in food. The body you will have at 70 is being built right now by the molecular signals you send through your daily choices. Aging is not a passive process you observe helplessly. It's an active biological process you influence every single day with what you eat. And now you know exactly how one simple, affordable root vegetable can activate the repair systems that determine whether you age with vitality or with accelerating decline. I see messages from people who've watched several of my videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. Could you check right now? Subscribing is free, takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel reach more people who want real science-based health information instead of just vague wellness advice. If this information was genuinely useful, please share it with someone you care about who's concerned about aging, cognitive decline, or maintaining physical resilience. They'll thank you. Check out my previous video where I break down the specific morning compounds that activate autophagy, your cellular cleaning system that declines with age and directly impacts how well your stem cells function once they're mobilized. Everything connects. Dr. Liana out.